The concept of Western civilization is relevant today because it's the legacy which we live with. Today, the West and its ideas are currently under attack. If we look at the West, particularly going as far back as ancient Greece, it invented the idea of a public square where all ideas would be welcomed and debated. That freedom of speech, which we get exclusively from the West, is the basic or fundamental right which we can derive many others. For if you do not have freedom to speak, then you do not have freedom to think, and that means that you do not have freedom to do. Alexander Rodenthal-Pobo, in his Reflections on Ancient and Modern Freedom, says basically that you cannot have deliberations in an atmosphere of terror or repression in which everyone fears to speak his mind. And this is a simple way to describe our current state of affairs here in the United States. I believe that Western civilization is relevant to us today because ever since the age of discovery and the rise of Europe and the emergence of the modern world, it's all a result of the West. It is the legacy which we live with today. It is something that every student and citizen should understand. However, according to Robert Royal in his Who Put the West in Western Civilization, he argues that most colleges do not introduce their students to basic historical knowledge of the West. The contributions of Western civilization are not only today downplayed, but it seems that only the negative aspects are emphasized. We're basically stabbing ourselves in the foot by creating a new generation of people who despise the very civilization that gave them their freedoms. We live with the freedom and liberty that the West brought from its origins in ancient Greece through the Romans and later Christendom. An attack on the West that is constantly being brought up is, for example, the use of slaves or slavery. But as Royal points out, slavery has been around since the beginning of time and was used in almost every ancient civilization. What is truly unique about the West is that the Greek thought about liberty would later be extended to all. Another attack on the West would be the feminist attack on income disparities between males and females. Yet the West would never have tolerated ancient practices such as Chinese foot binding, African female genital mutilation, Indian widow and sati, and the general repression of women in Islam that is still practiced today. So rather than attack the West, we should hold it up high as a civilization that has given so much to women today. The rule of law, the law of nations, and natural law, all notions that became dominant in Rome, became the mainstays of Western thought and that we live with today. It's incredible because if you really think about it, those who attack the West are using the same tools that allow them to attack it. They wouldn't be able to do that if they lived in an Islamic republic or under a Marxist ideological state. Had these freedoms not been passed down today, they would not have that right. Instead, they would live in a situation similar to the Chinese people today. And that is an irony itself. Attacking the West using the very tools, freedom and liberty, and freedom of expression to do it. How can you despise the same system that gives you the freedom to despise it? Truly an irony. According to Bradley Burzer in What Exactly Is the West, he says that the critics of the West are quick to point out racism, sexism, and imperialism, and they can be as emotionally violent as they are intellectually dull. They are missing the point, basically. That is not to say that the West has not made mistakes in the past. It has. And they have been monumental. You can look at the way, at the treatment of other cultures to the world wars. Those today who attack the West, Burzer argues, have absolutely no idea that the very freedom comes from those dead white males they hate, or they so hate. And that is why I believe that the concept of Western civilization is relevant today. We are who we are because of the West.